the mouth alcohol and that it would cause a spike. Why the fact that Miss Dawson had heartburn be a constant source of mouth alcohol? Can you explain that for us?
Yes. Heartburn can cause a constant mouth alcohol because of what heartburn is. If you think about a burp is just an instantaneous thing. It's just a burp. The mouth alcohol will eventually go away. However, when you have heartburn, the mouth alcohol is constant, which is why there wouldn't be a spike.
And also, opposing counsel spent a lot of time discussing the possibility of Miss Dawson's ratio. What, in any case, does that tell you about the actual testing, the actual number that was given to Miss Dawson the night that she was given that test?
Well, it would indicate to me that the test was wrong. Her ratio was not properly accounted for. And the ratio is one of the most important things to take into account when performing this test.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Brief recross, Your Honor. Dr. Norton, you believe that Ms. Dawson was too drunk to drive that night, don't you?
Objection, Your Honor. One, this is outside the scope of my redirect. And two, this is an improper interpretation of the law, things that have come up multiple times throughout trial. By asking Dr. Norton if Ms. Dawson was too drunk to drive, they're going into that DUI charge, which is not allowed in this jurisdiction.
Your Honor, maybe I heard on that. I'm not actually asking for his opinion relative to the legal limit in Midlands. I'm asking for his opinion as a professional analyst of alcohol effects. He can certainly testify in his expertise to whether or not this would have made Ms. Dawson too drunk to drive.
I believe your second point that you just made should be overruled because the issue is not whether she was too drunk to drive, but more importantly, his first objection, it's outside the scope of the redirect, is sustained.
No further questions, Your Honor.
May Dr. Norton step down, Your Honor?
The defense calls Leslie Roman. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Roman.
Ms. Roman, could you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I'm an accident reconstructionist here in Midlands.
And where'd you go to school?
I received my degree in engineering from the University of Texas at Austin.
Now, I'd like to talk about your work in accident reconstruction. What experience do you have in reconstructing accidents?
I've been doing this for about 8 years now. I even have my own firm.
Now, when reconstructing an accident, what kinds of facts and data do you need?
Ideally, I'd like to have the car or cars involved in the crash. I'd like to see the scene, the officers' reports, any crash team reports, and also any eyewitnesses.
Did you have access to such facts and data in this case?
Yes, I did. The police department here in Midlands was very cooperative with me.
And what methods do you use to analyze these facts?
I take all of those facts that I just mentioned and apply them to a primer that all of accident reconstructionists rely on in my field, and I reconstruct the accident from that.
Is that what you used in Ms. Dawson's case?
I do it every time, ma'am, yes.
Now, what factors did you focus on when reconstructing Ms. Dawson's accident specifically?
First thing I focused on was the speed.
And what did you find in regards to the speed?
Well, I found that before Ms. Dawson, at the time she exited the roadway, she was traveling at 51 miles per hour. When she re-entered the roadway and impacted the tree and the utility pole, she was traveling at 35 miles an hour.
Your Honor, may the witness step down to make use of demonstrative?
Your Honor, if necessary, may I reposition myself to better view the demonstrative?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Roman, excuse me, Ms. Roman, could you please explain to us where Ms. Dawson was experiencing these different speeds?
Sure. First, let me give you the order of the events. This is where she exited the roadway at first. This is where she re-entered the roadway. And point 3 is where she impacted the tree and the utility pole. Now, I know I've got a different speed than Officer Foster came up with, but that's because Officer Foster used the incorrect formula in that primer. Now in that primer there's both a narrow object formula and a wide object formula. Because Ms. Dawson impacted narrow objects, the utility pole and a tree, Officer Foster should have used that. However, Officer Foster used a wide object formula that's used normally when you impact other cars, or sides of buildings, or even houses.
Now, earlier today, you heard Officer Foster say he calculated the speed to be 66 miles per hour. What did you calculate the speed to be when Ms. Dawson left the roadway?
She left the roadway at 51 miles per hour. I'll just write that here.
Now, Ms. Broman, what other factors did you focus on when reconstructing the accident?
I focused on the road itself, the areas surrounding the road, and the wildlife surrounding, inhabiting that area around the road.
I'd like to talk about each of those things individually. Now, first let's talk about the road itself. What role did the road itself play in the accident?
Well, number one, there aren't any lights on the road. Sure, as we all know as responsible motorists, it's hard to drive in the dark. On top of that, the guardrails are not adequately protecting the road. Now, in order for you to understand that, you've got to understand what guardrails do. Guardrails protect motorists that deviate off of the roadway from hitting things like trees or falling off cliffs if roads are on top of cliffs. Canyon roads downgrade once you leave the road is at 40%. That's very steep, meaning that because there aren't any guardrails, it makes it very likely and very possible, also very easy for someone to tip their car when they drive off the road.
Now, could you show us the condition of the guardrails here?
Oh, sure, excuse me. At the time of the accident, the guardrail only extended to about this point here.
Now, you just said at the time of the accident. Are the guardrails different now?
Oh, yes. After the accident, the state of Midlands extended that guardrail past the point of the accident to about here.
Now, you said you also focused on the area surrounding the road. What part did that play in the accident?
Well, it's a very forested area. There are trees growing dangerously close to the road. The tree that Miss Dawson actually hit was growing about 2 feet away from the road. Now, couple that with the lack of the guardrail and the steep downgrade, it makes it likely and all too easy for any motorist who left the roadway even a little bit to hit a tree and cause an accident.
Now, you said the tree that Miss Dawson hit was 2 feet from the road. Now, at the time of the accident, was this part of the guardrail covering that?
No, it wasn't. The guardrail only extended to this point at the time of the accident. The tree was exposed.
Now, earlier you said you also looked at the wildlife surrounding Canyon Road. Why was that a problem?
Well, with any kind of heavy forested area, you run into all kinds of animals. You know, I can tell you from personal experience, animals don't really care about our cars. They have a tendency to run in front, and you can either hit those animals, and depending on how big they are, you could possibly kill yourself, or you can swerve. Now, what I recommend for any motorist is that they swerve to avoid those animals, because it's much safer to avoid a certain accident than plowing into an animal and possibly hurting yourself.
Now, after analyzing all these factors that you just told us, what did you determine the cause of this accident to be?
After I reviewed all the information, the angle at which Miss Dawson left the roadway, all the conditions of the road and the areas surrounding the road, I concluded that Miss Dawson performed an evasive maneuver because something appeared in her pathway at about this point here. Now, after she swerved to avoid that thing, a deer in this case, she maintained control of her vehicle around the most dangerous part of the curve. Half of her car was on the road, and the other half was driving on the grass. Now, Miss Dawson re-entered the roadway. However, because of the weather that night, it was raining very hard and the ground was slick, her car actually hydroplaned, and it spun out of control. Now, because Miss Dawson hydroplaned when she re-entered the roadway, that's why she impacted that tree and that utility pole.
Now, earlier you told us that what you recommend to be the safest option is to swerve to avoid something. In your opinion, did Miss Dawson choose the safest option that night?
Yes. Miss Dawson said that a deer appeared in her pathway. There's actually a deer crossing sign about a mile before this accident occurred. So, deer are heavily populated in this area. Now, deer can grow very big. If you hit a deer, unfortunately I've reconstructed accidents where motorists have died because they hit deer. It's the safest possible option to avoid that.
Thank you, Ms. Sermon. Your Honor, we pass the witness. Ms. Sermon, take your seat.
Thank you.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.